back here on the Rich Eisen Show, college football analyst Joel Klatt, who's calling Utah at UCLA this coming weekend right here in Los Angeles. How are you, Joel?
Good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How's A&M and Alabama going to suss out? What do you got for me here on this one?
Well, listen, I think Alabama is so much better than almost everybody in college football right now. You know, if they just play okay, they're going to win probably by 2 scores. A&M's good this year. Listen, I don't want to take anything away from A&M, and that fan base generally hates when I say things like this. But the fact of the matter is that they had a big lead against UCLA, let them back into the game, had to go to overtime at home. They got 7 turnovers from Tennessee, still had to go to overtime to win the game against Tennessee. So while they're undefeated, you know, they very easily could be a 2-loss team, maybe even 3-loss team if any bounce of the football goes any other direction. So while they're running the ball very well, they're not in Alabama's class. And with Jalen Hurts coming of age, I don't know if anyone's going to be beating Alabama this year.
Well, and it all comes down to it. We talked about it at the end of the last hour, Joel. We are 2 Tuesdays away from the first college football playoff rankings being released. And it strikes me that we're going to have one, maybe if not 2, one-loss teams raising their hands saying we should be included in this. Who do you think those one-loss teams might be? Let's front-load the argument that we're going to see in about 4 to 6 weeks is essentially what I'm saying to you right now.
What's interesting is, Rich, if there was like a doomsday scenario, it would be like an A&M win this weekend, and then A&M were to lose to somebody but still go to the SEC championship game, and Alabama would be a one-loss non-conference champ that's sitting there, and everyone would think that they would deserve a spot. Obviously, Louisville is going to have a chance with a 1 loss. The loser of Michigan-Ohio State is going to be sitting there with 1 loss and have a great argument, having the only loss on their schedule, at least I'm projecting, to be in that game. And then we'll see what happens in the Pac-12. By the way, we still have 2 undefeateds in the Big 12 that don't get much love at all, but we could be sitting there with a 1-loss conference champ, whether it's Baylor or West Virginia. So there's certainly doomsday scenarios out there. I think that the team with the best argument, were it to get to this point with 1 loss, would be the loser of Michigan-Ohio State.
Well, and in that regard, you know, my compadre Chris Brockman here accused me of bringing it up the last hour because he's concerned Michigan's going to lose to Ohio State, and I'm already trying to lay the groundwork for Michigan to get a shot at the national championship. But the loser of that game doesn't even make the Big Ten championship game, Joel. So
yeah,
that's
what's tough. Louisville is going to be in that situation. The loser of this A&M Alabama game is going to be in that situation, and that's where Ohio State was a year ago. When, listen, I certainly thought they were one of the 4 best teams, but I didn't think they were one of the 4 most deserving. That's where I feel like the language of the college football playoff, Rich, is so poor. You know, they fought. Mike Slive of the SEC fought tooth and nail for it to say the 4 best teams versus what all the other conferences wanted, which was the 4 most deserving teams. You know, we want to make this a beauty pageant in college football. I think it's one of the things that is wrong with our sport, rather than allowing these kids who don't get paid anyways to go out there and earn it on the field. I really don't care who's favored. If you're saying who's the 4 most the best teams, we should have Vegas do the rankings versus the teams that actually go out there and win. Listen, there were games that we wouldn't have won. You know, if we played 12 times, we were going to win 1 time. But for one 60-minute affair, maybe you're better that day, and that should be rewarded. And so that's one of the things that I feel like the rankings just fall woefully short of.
Joel Klatt of Fox Sports joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. I mean, what would happen if Washington played Alabama? That one really intrigues me, right? I mean, just throw that out there. Just 2 teams from opposite ends of the country, you know, different contrasting styles in a way. I mean, what would happen in that one, Joel?
You know, what's interesting is that Alabama, when they struggle with quarterbacks that are very efficient down the field and can threaten you down the field. And that's what Jake Browning has done. I mean, 23 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. He's, at least at this point in the season, a very clear second position to Lamar Jackson in the Heisman Trophy race. Now, that may or may not come to fruition because, as you know, the voter base for the Heisman Trophy is, 1, so biased, and 2, so lazy that they don't watch West Coast football.
Love that.
We've only had 2 West Coast Heismans that didn't go to USC from Jim Plunkett on, Jim Plunkett and Marcus Mariota. So he might not win the trophy, but he is a very good player. They can run the ball. They can beat you in several different ways, and I think the most important part of their team, which would I think at least show up against Alabama is the fact that their front seven is as good as anybody. They just throttled Stanford, sacked their quarterbacks 8 times. Richmond, I was talking to their defensive coordinator. They blitzed exactly 0 times in that game. They did it with base defense. That's when you know you're dominant.
So give me the team that would give Alabama its best game. Is it Texas A&M this weekend? Is it somebody else not even in the SEC? Who would it be, do you think, right now?
I still think that the team best suited to match up with Alabama is Ohio State because of the style of play that they utilize, the quarterback that they have, and the fact that defensively they're as good as anybody out there. I saw them against Oklahoma. They're so sound. They ran into a little bit of a buzzsaw against Wisconsin on the road at night, top 10 matchup, and they still won the game. So for a young team, that's a big moment for them. I would think that they would be the most difficult matchup for Alabama. I would favor Alabama, but I think Ohio State would be the most difficult matchup.
All right, so let's stop dancing around. How serious do you think Michigan is here, Joel?
I think Michigan is very serious. I really do. At this point, I have them rated above Ohio State because of the way that they handled Wisconsin versus the way Ohio State handled Wisconsin. And I know that I just praised Ohio State for coming away with a win,
right,
which they should be praised. But, Rich, the bottom line is this. Wisconsin was very lucky to even be in the game against Michigan. All the missed field goals, you know what I'm talking. I mean, Michigan dominated that game up and down, 159 total yards for the Badgers. Meanwhile, I felt like Ohio State was fortunate to be in the game and have a chance late in the game against Wisconsin. So because of that, I flipped them, at least in my poll, and I put Michigan number 2. I don't know if Michigan is best suited to beat Alabama just because of the style of offense that they have. But that being said, Michigan is really good. I wouldn't be shocked at all if they were able to beat Ohio State and win the Big Ten and go into the playoffs.
So which team are we not talking about that you think needs to be thrown into this national championship mix right here with, like I said, 2 Tuesdays before the first poll of the national championship quartet gets thrown out?
You're gonna think I'm crazy, Rich.
No,
but
no.
let me get first. I'm gonna give you a stat,
Okay.
and then I'm gonna tell you who that maybe points towards.
Give me the stat, and I'll try and guess. How does that sound, Joel?
Okay. So 7 of the 8 college football playoff entrants over the first 2 years of the playoff, at this point in the season, in those respective years, were not in the top 4 of the AP poll. 7 of 8. That's pretty remarkable. So when I start looking past 4 in the poll and teams that could potentially win their conference, obviously you've got Washington. We've already talked about them. They've got a great shot. West Virginia. I'm telling you, West Virginia could throw a wrench in this whole thing, and here's why. They're still undefeated.
I wouldn't have guessed it, by the way. I would not have guessed West Virginia, by the way, but go ahead.
They're tough, they're hard-nosed, they're scrappy, and it's really difficult to win in Morgantown. Really difficult to win in Morgantown. And here's the reason why their schedule favors them so much is that they've got TCU this weekend in Morgantown. They've got Oklahoma in Morgantown. They've got Baylor in Morgantown. Their most difficult games are at home. I saw them last week against Texas Tech, and listen, are they one of the 4 best teams in the country? I probably wouldn't put them on that list, but the fact remains they could earn themselves a playoff berth if they, remain undefeated and end up winning the Big 12 conference. It's not going to help that the conference is so weak, and obviously we had the whole charade with the expansion, non-expansion deal a week ago. But just keep your eye on West Virginia. If they get past TCU this weekend, they're going to have a lot of momentum going down the stretch.
Great. Have a great broadcast, Utah, UCLA. Say hi to Gus Johnson. And, Joel, you got to come in here in studio. You got to see this place, okay? Nothing this phone talk.
I would love to. My schedule's crazy, but I'm going to do my best to get in there. I appreciate it, Rich.
Always.
Thanks for having me on.
Always. That's Joel Klatt.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.